it is truly like the greatest anthropological experience ever to sit down and talk to people who are different than you, if you can come in with a posture of curiosity and compassion.
What if the key to transformation lies in shifting your perspective? Hi, I'm Dr. Payal Beri. Welcome to Reframing Perspectives. Every conversation here is about one thing: how empathy changes the way we lead, connect, and create impact. Each episode, we get to explore deep, authentic conversations designed to expand your mindset. Whether you're looking to transform your leadership, deepen your relationships within your circle, your community, and friends, or gain clarity in your own personal growth, each episode will inspire you to see things differently and take action. If you're ready to challenge your thinking and embrace transformation, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. If there is one word I can use to describe Jon and Becky, it is generosity. These two humans have created a community, We Are for Good, which is an impact-activated community and platform dedicated to empowering change makers through community building and storytelling. And when I say that these two people have really created a movement focused on equity and activation, their aim is to revolutionize generosity through innovative approaches and a strong emphasis on community engagement and empathy. I mean, there's nobody else that I know that I've experienced, that I've been in the room with, that have been able to do it in this way because it is deeply embedded in their DNA. Jon and Becky are on a mission. They're fueled by the simple, deep-seated belief that philanthropy can change people, businesses, and communities to the core. And you see it in everything they do. You see it in the movement. You see it in the community that they've built. They have changed the way that people really connect. And it is an incredible space where nonprofit leaders can really be equipped with mindsets and a tool to grow their philanthropy and can change the world, because at the core, that's what they care about. Jon and Becky want to change the world and want to make sure that the right people, the change makers, are equipped with that space. But to hear their story, how they started, where they came from, why this was just a deeply embedded value of theirs, and what they are doing today, it is, my friends, one of the most beautiful conversations I've had with the two most beautiful humans, and I cannot wait for you to dive in. Jon and Becky, my favorite humans that I have recently met that I can't get enough of. And I am just so excited to talk to you. I'm so excited for
Oh,
the community to
Grand.
hear you. You're just incredible humans. I just want to dive into everything that you have built with We Are for Good and everything that you're doing with the community. But before we go into the actual work that you're doing, I just really want people to know, like, I can't speak enough about how from the minute we connected till now, it's just like, I want, how do I keep getting more of you guys? You know, it's the community
Pyle.
that
So
you've built. It just,
so kind.
it
Thank you.
really is. It's not easy to build a community where there's also such deep alignment and you feel it across every single person who's there. People have the intention of building strong communities. They have the intention of like wanting this, but I think it's really easy for a lot of people to get derailed because they start seeing other things and, you know, a community expands and they don't know how to contain it, all these things. But you have an incredible community globally, and it doesn't matter what event of yours I've gone to, it's the same feeling consistently. You feel the good. You really feel the good. And so I'm just so excited to have you guys to talk to today.
Warm mom
And
hug
my
coming right out of the
gosh.
gate.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Receiving those words. Thank you, my friend. And I remember the second that I got to meet you, I started immediately texting Becky and Julie, and I was like, I
I
have
remember
met We
those.
Are for Good soulmate. So you get ready.
Totally. And we've
Yes.
been like lifelong friends since then. I feel like it's been like you're a lifelong
Oh,
friend, and it hasn't been that
100%.
long. Yeah.
100%. So I want to actually ask both of you something that's really important is like we always hear about how people are doing the work that they're doing now. But I want to dig into what was it like growing up and the narrative that you heard consistently around yourselves and what you saw and what you believed in because that's what you were fed.
Mm. 1, 2, 3, not it, Jon.
Pyle goes deep right out of the gate. Sure, I'll start, and then our stories intertwine when Becky and I meet later post-college. But I grew up in small town Oklahoma, very small town, 20,000 people. And my dad was a pastor of a local church. the church was everything in our life. We were there multiple days a week. My dad set up the chairs, would count the dots on the carpet to make sure they're in the exact same spot, which probably is where some of my design neuroses come from. I have a brother that's kind of like the other side of the brain for me. So I've always been a creative, wanted to be an artist from very young age, wanted an easel before most people knew what an easel was. And my brother kind of went off and did finance and accounting and all of this. And I grew up to be truly like graphic design artist. But I think some of those early signs showed up, in just how we showed up in the world. And I think I was an artist in the middle of Oklahoma that felt out of place. I didn't really care for sports, so I was always the last one picked, and that started to put some chinks in the armor.
Uh,
I bring this
this
up
hurts
because
me every time you say it.
I bring it up because I think it's important that those were moments that have definitely stacked for how I think about community building, how I think about inclusion, how I think about walking into relationships today. Is like it starts by being literally last picked for so many years, like on a
Yeah.
team. And it just like pains you. And I was in a loving home. I was in a really supportive community in that sense. I mean, our church was very close, but I was in a very small bubble at the same time, small town Oklahoma. And growing up, I didn't have a broad worldview of what maybe other people's experiences were like, other, challenges that people were facing. And so going to college was a big shift for me because it was the first time to really leave town, but it was also the first time I got to travel. I started traveling when I was in college and had my first like overseas experience to go to Thailand, and it changed my life. Like, I mean, from
Oklahoma to
living in
Thailand.
Right?
it changed everything, because you realize how much we're alike, but have completely different lifestyles and opportunities and just the inequities that you see, I think, when you step out of your bubble. And that was the very beginning of planting seeds that I'm like, my future family, my future life, like I don't want my future children to grow up in a small bubble, but I want them to be really open-minded, and I want them to see all people and accept all people from a really early age. And so that's been a really big cornerstone that I definitely come back to all the time, of just like, it started from where I began, and it's like, I still want to like feed that today.
Wow. It's really interesting, right? Because when we grow up in these like insular environments, and to some degree, every kid does. Every kid, no one knows what's happening outside of that until you go to college, or you're like, your world is view is like, whoa, what happened? And some people actually just can't handle the fact that their world is so different, and they go even more into their own insular world versus, so
Mm,
that's where it's so interesting to know that you grew up the way you did, and then going to Thailand, and that immediately like shifted the fact that, oh my gosh, like I need my family future forward going, and for myself to see this as there's so much out there, there's so many different ways of living existing. And I think that just kind of goes back down to the fact that you mentioned that you grew up still in a very loving family.
mhm.
I think that makes a huge difference, that security. Becky, I'm so curious about, your like, what was it for you?
Mine is like the polar opposite, but also the same. Like we say that a lot. Often, I also grew up in a really loving household. My father was a physician. My mother is a musician. So I had much of the left and the right brain in my life. I was a middle child, and we come from a very strong Italian family where it's alla familia all the time. Like we
I can
have
relate.
big families, we are loud, we cook a lot, we eat a lot. Music is very much a part of my childhood, but both my parents grew up in bigger cities, St. Louis, Kansas City, and from my purview as a child, they were about the most progressive parents that I knew, and they were hippies. I think they literally graduated in 1969 from high school, as you can
Wow.
imagine. And so this concept of questioning things, being a free thinker, trying lots of things. I really commend my parents for they didn't judge, which I feel like is a real hallmark around evangelical states like Oklahoma, where there's a huge propensity to judge. And my parents were not like that. However, the story that I was told as a child, or at least the story that I always talk about, is that I was too much. I was
Mm,
always too loud and too talkative, and I took charge. It was just, I had a really big personality and I always had strong opinions and things to say. And part of that, was because I was empowered to speak and to think. But I always felt myself regulating in some way to pull back a little bit. And then kind of fast forward to, I'm 45 now, but when I was 43, I got diagnosed with ADHD. And I was like, oh, so that's why I feel like I am too much and I have this sense of intensity
mm,
about me, but I'm a very, very strong Enneagram 2. I'm a deep empath. And so I love people really, really well. And I always gravitated toward certain things in my life where I could be in service to other people. And my parents really modeled being someone who always looked around and
mm, mm,
looked at who didn't have and what did I have to share. And service was very much a part of my growing up. And I loved the way I felt when I would go out, and we had a certain apartment complex our church took over, and we did everything for it to build this apartment complex for homeless families. And we bought all their groceries and we did all of the plumbing, and like my father did all of the medicine, and my mom did music classes, and I would go in and read with the kids. And it's just, there was this sense of like getting out of our world that I really, really liked. And so the metamorphosis of We Are for Good, I mean, everything in my childhood felt like training ground to break out of the bubble and the privilege that I never wanted to be contained in. And I think that's sort of a metaphor of my life, is I never wanted to be contained. I wanted to be free and loud and expressive and joyful, and I wanted to hug everyone. And so this is such an interesting psychological experience, I will say right now. I'm like, it's all coming together very, very well. Yeah. I'm so glad to
Yeah.
have it with you.
Yeah, no, I think it's fascinating. Like, as you both are talking, right? Like, and my life has been so different. I traveled all around the world as a kid and then finally like stayed put. But it's so interesting because, and I think this is like the core of it. It's that, John, you had this like very contained in one space, like the pastor father, type of environment. And Becky, you had this creative, world that you were just like thrown into Italian. I'm Indian. So it's like same thing. Loud food
You
is
get
always
it.
the core of it,
Yep.
right? There's no like, can I come over? You just barge in, like you just walk in,
Yeah.
right? Like there's no
And you
like,
better clear
oh,
your plate or you're going to insult
right.
my grandmother's cooking. So yeah,
Exactly, and if you're
absolutely.
quiet at the dinner table, like, what's wrong with you, right? Like, why are you not actually
Totally.
speaking? And then on top of that being, a woman where it's like, you're too much, you're speaking too much, your opinion. It's so interesting because it's like, but this is our culture. What do you mean? And so, but
mm,
either way, what I think is so fascinating is like, here are 3 people with 3 different backgrounds, 3 different ways, but yet the core of what's at the center of each one of our backgrounds was the fact of service and impact. Right?
Yeah.
mm.
And I think that that's what's so important is that we get so stuck in that if you are X type of a person, or if you belong to this religion, or if you are here, then only like we are the ones who do this. Like we are the devout this, we are the devout that. And it's like, no, like look at the core piece of that, right? So I'm just so curious with you, John and Becky, like what brought you guys, like, as you're going through that, like, John, you're talking about the design and the creativity, and both of you have this like urge of like wanting to see and do good and be inclusive. But what was it that brought you guys to this place of like coming together and saying, like, wait a second, we really want to take the values that we grew up with and actually like turn this into something that we
Mm.
then bring people into it so that anyone who's felt the way we have felt now has a space for that?
Yeah, I mean, there was a gap of time that this kind of came together. So if you pick up when I was in college, Becky was a recent grad. I'm about to graduate from the graphic design program in Oklahoma State. And I knew I didn't want to go sell like potato chips, like I nothing against that because I really love potato
Why?
chips,
Potatoes are the
right?
best.
They're the best.
You're not motivated by that?
Yeah, but I didn't want to go like the agency route. I wanted to be connected to like purpose. Around the same time, I passed this flyer in the art building that's like graphic design intern needed OSU foundation. And I was like, oh, it's like a foundation, like they're doing good, they're providing scholarships. I should go check this out. So like I went home and tried to like put together this portfolio, tried to show up my best, walk in, get an interview, and there is sitting Becky Endicott across from me. And I have a clip-on necktie. She's forgiven me for that. But she gave me the job, the opportunity, which turned into like a full-time job right after college. And like we were two ridiculous idealists. Like I would say we were gravitated to each other immediately because we saw that we saw the world in the same way. And like we were both enamored with philanthropy, like the power of the stories, the power of the impact, like getting to like be at the epicenter of that in Storytell. So we just became like really fast friends in that sense, happily married to other people. And that was like the beginning. Do you want to tell the next step? Because that was the first few years. And then what happened, B? Do you want to take it from here?
And then we moved from higher ed and did 10 years in healthcare philanthropy. And if you can imagine, we were getting sued by Garth Brooks, like at the beginning of that tenure, which is an entirely different story and a great
Yeah.
story over cocktails. And as that sort of upheaval is happening, we're trying to get a sense of the culture of philanthropy in our organization, which was 10,000 employees working for this hospital system. And we were trying to pilot an employee giving campaign at the time. And this ended up being sort of the watershed moment for We Are for Good, where we started looking around at best practices and we were like, we hate absolutely everything. Everything is disconnected. There's nothing human in any of this. It's extremely transactional. I can't see where impact is. I don't even feel good. People don't even know we exist. They didn't know we existed until this country music star sued us. And so we ended up building something that was fundamentally different. And I would almost say we just flipped the playbook upside down and we did the opposite of what everybody told us to do. And we didn't focus on money at all. And we didn't focus on C-suite. We focused on people on the very bottom, whether it was people serving food, cleaning hospital rooms, or maybe a respiratory therapist or something. And we were like, hey, what do you care about? And what's the story behind that? And it was that simple. And it was like, okay, if you care about that, would you like to make a gift to it? And P.S., here's what we're going to buy. Here's how many people it's going to impact. And the collective is going to buy this. And so we ended up our eyebrow quirked because we saw this massive movement unleash within our hospital system where people really got back into the heart of why they do the work. And they connected it not just to their giving, but to their identity, to their values, to those things that we just talked about that we had ingrained as kids. And it brought it back to center. And we all figured out we were connected in that. And Jon and I really just looked at each other and said, there is a different way to do this work. And there are so many limiting beliefs in not just philanthropy, but in organizing, in marketing, in messaging, and the way we gather. And what if we could throw the playbook away or maybe turn it upside down again? What would it look like? And would anybody show up? And for a while, when we turned the podcast on for the first time, we're like, well, it could be us and our mothers. That could be all the listeners that are out there.
Thanks, Mom, by
But
the way. Yeah.
yes, thank you. Thank you, Mom. But we started the journey with our values and we put that was our core content right up front. And from there, we taught and started meeting as many people as we could. And here we are today, full-fledged movement. So
Wow. That's
Yeah.
incredible. You said something that, do you think that you have to be to some degree an idealist in order to be able to really curate the type of community that you have with the movement that you have? Because like you said, you flipped everything upside down, and I get it, right? Philanthropy, foundation, donation, it's about the money. Like ultimately you're trying to get the money so that you can create these things. But you really did it from like a heart-centered place. And you did it from okay, well, the core is that yes, we want this money, but we want this money for the good. So why are we not
Yeah.
positioning the good? Why are we not positioning the mission and the people who are impacted by that and connecting directly to the people who understand that because they either live it themselves, they experience it, they know somebody who experiences, and they're going to feel more compelled by it. But do you think that the way you've described it, that you two saw the world in the same way, idealists and all this stuff, do you think that that's like a core part of what allows you to have built such a successful movement?
I mean, I definitely think it's been core to it. And I'll say there's a couple of big threads that come together as you asked that, because Number one, I think you can galvanize people around getting mad about something really easily.
Mhm.
Like, I don't like the color
Very.
of this tablecloth. We ran galas. So, like, the gala committees would get so mad about the dumbest of things, about the color of the
Mhm.
linens and stuff like that. But you can gather people like that. But I think when you gather around something that you're for, this vision of something better, it's just deeper and it's just more long lasting. It's more durable. And there's like this uplift that I think we're all ultimately looking for. Even if we're angry today collectively, we got to have the uplift, you know? And I think Christy Kern, who's this brilliant storyteller, came through our podcast and she said, you don't want to be just against something. You want to be really clear about what you're for. And I think that day I realized it was embedded into the name of We Are for Good. We didn't know why that name made sense, but it's like, it is this like light to others that you're like, we, the collective, really are for something that's bigger than any one of us. And I think that's probably the mindset shift that's the most important is like, we didn't want it to be just about us. We knew that we were going to be the first microphones that were flipped on. But from the very beginning, how do we make this a really inclusive, bigger conversation? Because we do not know anything. I mean, we know very little. We know some things, right? We know very small things of what's worked in our experience and what were our stories and our, the things that we're learning. But it's so much more of a beautiful mosaic to think of like, man, the collective, the answers, the wisdom, the heart, the stories that are in this group, the we is so much better than anything that we could have dreamed of. And so I think the optimism is imperative. And I see a lot of communities now that are gathering around the opposite. And I don't know. I just don't think it's the same level of depth and connection. I think that you really miss out on something when you don't have that.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I'm curious though that so you've had your podcast for almost 5 years now. You've
Mhm.
interviewed countless amount of people, you've connected, you've heard so many stories. I wanna know how that and from the minute where you said, we flipped it on and we're like, "Okay, hopefully mom's listening," and, whatever's going on, but now you've just, grown this, 600,000 downloads, per episode, wild, right? And it just clearly it's resonating because what you're saying is true. It's like there's so much fatigue around
Mm.
Yes.
the fear because it does, right? It works, obviously, the momentum of that fear works, but it's not sustainable. And so what you're doing is sustainable. It's a
Mm.
continuous high that you get from there. But I'm really curious to know that again, going back to growing up in Oklahoma, growing up in St. Louis, growing up in these places, and then you start this and you've obviously were doing the work, but now you're like, okay, we're doing this. We are for good. We've got this podcast going. We've talked to thousands of people. If you were to take back and go back to the child version of you and what you believed in. And now you're here after having had thousands of interviews. What would you say is like a narrative, a story that you're like, wow, this has just opened a huge door for me that I would have never known existed prior to this podcast?
I don't know if there's one specific instance, but I can tell you that when we started this podcast, I was 40. I'm 45 now. And when I think of myself at 40, I think of myself as a child because that is
Wow.
how much my mind, my heart, my worldview have expanded. I am not even close to the same person I was 5 years ago. And that's what listening can do. And I will confess something. We launched our podcast in August of 2020. That's when we really launched We Are for Good. And 2 months before that, George Floyd was killed. And I remember I couldn't fully watch the video, but I knew what was going on. And I remember something shattered within me, and I almost woke up in a way that I wasn't even aware I was asleep. I thought I
Mhm.
was such a champion for equity. I thought I knew what was going on in the world. And when I saw the experience of that, I felt absolutely convicted that I had to know so much more and get out of my bubble and get out of what I thought I knew. And being able to have the honor and privilege of sitting down with someone whose story I don't know, whose lived experience I can't relate to, has been the most humbling gift that has expanded my heart, my mind. I mean, I'm moving across the country to an entirely different state because I understand now what I want in community and what I want my children to be raised in. It has changed the way I parent. It changes the way I speak to people. And it is truly like the greatest anthropological experience ever to sit down and talk to people who are different than you, if you can come in with a posture of curiosity and compassion. So I don't know what you would say, John.
I mean, wow.
Mic drop.
Yeah, my life has been seismically changed as well. Like, I think it's interesting that we've had the transformation together because we knew each other for 15 years before this experience. And in a lot of ways, it seems like it's been 15 years of Weird for Good because there's been
Totally.
so much that's happened. But I agree, like the listening, you think of like you may have the opportunity to meet a lot of people in some context, but it's really a different experience to sit for an hour with somebody. And the questions that are like some of the through lines with We Are for Good, one of them is like, tell us about your, formative experiences growing up, which takes us into someone's background and takes us into their home or takes them into a moment when they didn't have shoes or whatever, like they're bringing us back to. But we ground the conversation at the end by asking like a moment of philanthropy that's changed them. And like you can't sit across from somebody that maybe you didn't feel like you had anything in common, and certainly didn't from rural Oklahoma to some of the people that we've met. But like by the end, you realize the core values that stick and that bind us are all like universally the same. Like we're all looking for love and hope and that moment of acceptance or that moment of belonging or that moment that they felt seen. And you're like, man, we're so like connected. And to have spent 40 years of my life never inviting these type of conversations in, and some of it was geographically impossible. In rural Oklahoma, you're not going to have the same level of diversity.
Yeah.
But in
Yeah.
today's world, and especially the way that we can access media and story and people, there's no excuse to have blinders on when we have such interconnected needs and desires and values in this world. Like we need each other. So yeah, it's completely shifted. It's definitely shifted the way that I parent and think about all things. And it's in the best of ways.
Yeah. You both mentioned that, right? Like just in these 5 years alone and Becky, like that was so powerful to say that, I see myself as a kid at 40 because
Yeah.
I think that's something that's also just really powerful for us to always see. It's like if I think of myself as like, yeah, the 35-year-old, like I'm 42, and I think of myself in I was such a kid, right? And I can just imagine like, my parents are in their mid 70s and they probably that's why like they see me as that or they think of themselves in their 50s and 60s. And I think it's just brings back to the point that we're never done.
Yeah.
We're always learning, right? There's never gonna be a moment that we're not gonna have that element of we were naive and now we're not. And it's humbling because it's that idea that if you always just recognize that there's something I'm maybe naive about, there's something I don't know as much about, like, it'll just keep you learning. It'll keep you open to understanding it, right? Versus be like, "I'm old, I've learned everything, I don't care." And there are plenty of people out there that are like that.
Mhm.
Yes, we
Yeah.
know a lot of them. I think yes. I told John and Julie, our incredible producer, one time that the We're for Good experience for me has taught me that I wanna continually evolve. I
Mhm.
wanna
Mhm.
always be evolving, and I think when you have that posture of, "I don't want things to change,"
Mhm.
or I don't wanna know," it's shutting out a huge section of the world and of your mind and of your heart. If I had stayed in my little world, in my bubble, I wouldn't have found all of these incredible people who are doing just transcendent things in the world. And it has changed me as a human being and it's made me better. And I want to continue to be better. And I think all of us, when we grow and evolve, it's a humbling journey, but it is such a fruitful and rewarding journey. And my kids get to bear the fruit of that as I keep learning,
Yeah.
and I hope they'll do the same and their kids will as well. So, yeah, what a journey.
What
Mm.
about with, if you think about this and the journey that you've had, and of course that you get to pass on to your kids, but what about the communities that you grew up in and the communities that have grown with you? Those relationships, how has your time with We Are for Good reframed your relationships or helped influence or create inspiration and opening doors for others within your neighborhoods and communities to also be like, oh, maybe they wouldn't have been as open to this, but because they know John since he was a kid, because they know Becky since you were young, they're like, we trust them. Okay, yeah, what do they have to say? And bring them along to that. So, what has that journey been like?
Yeah. I think living or taking risk in a public way, which I would say was this. I mean, leaving
Mhm.
a job that was secure, that was kind of filling in the 5-year timeline or whatever we were rocking at the time. It was like a moment of risk to do this, and it took courage on both of our families collectively to like make the decision. But I'll say, like, I think what's moved me the most is people from all different parts of my life that have like come forward to say, hey, I saw this step that you've taken and it's inspired me to do X, or I'm really curious about doing Y, or I see the purpose that you have in what you're doing. And it's like, I want that too. And it doesn't need to be to start a podcast and do whatever we're doing, but it's like, I feel really clear that I want to be an encourager, which is empowering other people to find their courage to do that thing that is their light inside of them. Like, I think that that's very clear to me in like this season of life and the next, is that how we're moving through this world be a light so other people can take the risk. Because I think a lot of people sit around and they're like, oh, I'd never do that. I was terrified of how my voice sounded. I was terrified of like what I was going to say. I was terrified of like how we were going to make money. I'm still kind of scared of that some
Yeah.
days,
Yeah.
like
Always.
all of the layers of like, but we had to reject all of that to open up the doors that have happened.
Mhm.
And if we can inspire or say, hey, I know somebody that did this thing that allows them to take one little step, or Becky moving across the country, I mean, that's like a big leap that feels impossible. So I think of some of those conversations that shifted that have been really poignant, that there's a reason that we've stayed connected for that reason alone, maybe.
And I think the power of what you're saying in relational equity, like you are building relational equity your entire life, whether
Mm,
that's with
Yeah.
your Sunday school teacher, or this person you went to college with, or the neighbor across the street. And it's like every interaction is building to that relational equity and trust. And I'll tell you, that showed up really big for We Are for Good's launch. And it showed up in a way where for 6 weeks before we launched, we were working at night. We were like doing two jobs at that time. And we would spend about an hour a night and we would email 10 people every night.
Wow.
And it would be like Facebook Messenger or, through Instagram or something. It would be like, hey, so and so, we've known each other for this long, and I'm about to launch something. And I don't know if it's going to work, but here's the heart behind it. And I know you love me and have supported me for years. So here's 3 ways you can help me when you see this launch. You can download the podcast, you can share it on your feed, you can tag in a nonprofit professional. And hey, as you see us going, amplify it, And so when we launched, we had this. When you think about all those neighbors and people who have grown up with you, my Spanish teacher was like one of our biggest supporters, and my pediatrician, like, who had no connection to our business, but they had that connection to me and they had that belief, and they continue to show up for this. And I also have had so many people say, I didn't know this about people in the unhoused community. I didn't
Mhm.
know this about, the Black Lives Matter movement, or how nonprofits are resource strapped. And so the more we talk and the more we speak again with kindness and through our values, not what we're against, that brings people in. They stick around longer. They're more curious. They might lean in. And that has been such a great unlock for us of just having trusted community and saying that we're scared along the way. I'm very scared to do this, but I'm trusting and we're going for it. People want to root for an underdog. And I feel like We Are for Good will forever be the underdog.
You guys are masters of your crafts. Everything that you're saying right there, right? Like where you're calling in just your everyday person, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's like we complicate things too much, that it needs to be this bigger and grander, and because that's what we're sold on TV and through media and all of this stuff, that like unless I have this massive platform, how am I going to do anything for good, right? Like I'm
Right.
just right here. And ultimately, it's like, no, it literally comes down to like, who was your favorite teacher that you still are connected with, right? Who was your school counselor? Who was someone that you worked with like in 3 jobs ago that you're still connected to, that, are your champions? And the fact that they're coming in because again of that relationship, and that opens a door to seeing like, wow, I didn't realize that we have such an issue with water. Why in the first place do we even have an issue with water?
Right?
Mm,
Like
Yes.
yeah.
how is it that corporate can buy water and sell it back to us? Like, why is it that there are places that don't even have clean water? Like, or, and unhousing, right? Like, why is it that there's so many people that don't have it? And why food inequity, like all of these things, it's such important topics that you're bringing
Mhm.
in to help people understand, learn, but in such a kind manner. Because I think that's the other piece, right? When we talk about some of these challenges and these issues, they're talked about it with such a fear in place, and they're talked about it
Yeah.
from a place
Mm.
of, if you don't do this or if you don't help this. And then people have this idea of also, why should I care? I'm tired. I just worked my 9 to 5 job. I got to take my kid to gym, theater, dance, art, paint, swim school, whatever. Write the list. I am a driver of my
Real
child.
talk.
I don't have time to care about these things. So how do you get people to care about the things that they think that they don't need to necessarily care about?
Mm. I mean, one thing that came to mind is that we always are looking for like a practical application. We come at conversations from a different place. Becky's like a masterful storyteller and can remember the details of someone's child's name from 20
That's
years
my
ago.
ADHD, baby.
Yeah.
Love
And
it.
I'm like,
Memory is an
give us the
elephant.
business framework, like I don't know. So we bring kind of these ideas together, but I think recognition of that there is always a first step that you can take today, and we call it a one good thing, is like transformative. And I just feel like an evangelist for this idea because it's really easy with every current crisis in front of us that feels way too big for any one of us. But there is something that we can do. And if at a minimum, it's to see someone else and let them know that you care about them or that you're going to open a space for dialogue, like that's an amazing one good thing. But getting practical and recognition that if you believe that community is everything, which is our core value, and you believe that the collective is where it's at, so that's how this works. Like we all take small action together. And so we try to bring every conversation to that. And it's like a cultural thing that we do as we get people together, that we don't want to leave just thinking, well, that was a nice conversation, but like what now? And so I think it's kind
Yeah.
of a practice that can kind of change your life too, as you kind of implement that.
Yeah. And the work again, like when you bring this community together, and I've been on some, that one call last week alone, and it was so
Mm,
powerful. And you have people who are doing such incredible work and they're feeling scared, they're feeling alone. And, you bring people together. How do you, especially in the work that you're highlighting and building awareness around, it can be very emotionally charged,
Yeah.
mm,
very. And you're bringing a very diverse group of individuals together who obviously think from different lenses of how to tackle some of these challenges and issues. So, how do you help, I guess, ground some of that emotional charge so that
mm.
it doesn't affect the two of you as well as you're doing that work and you're calling people in? Because I can imagine that there are times where you get fatigued. There's times where you do feel defeated, right? We're human, it happens.
Yeah.
But when you have such a passionate community that feels very strongly about what's happening, how do you kind of create some balance for yourselves?
Mm,
It is incredibly hard, and I will tell you, I absolutely sucked at it. The first 3 years of We Are for Good, and truly, I cannot mince words enough to say that if I had not had my therapist with me, helping me through this process, I don't know that I still would be at We Are for Good because, I think a lot of empaths have a problem with, I was just sharing this with John and Julie today, like introjection, which is this concept of you absorb the energy of people around you.
mm,
And it could be good energy, it could be negative energy, it could be stressful energy. And having a conscious bias that you know that that's going to happen. And so I've had to be really good about putting boundaries up because when you want to help everybody, it's really, really hard and it can absolutely deplete you. But I will say that I find ways to stay grounded in what is really, really important to me, which are, the most important things to me are my 2 daughters, and loving them and seeing that they have a vibrant and full life. And so I know that I can draw from that well that is them on days that it's really, really hard. Or I get into community. I have a sort of sustainable sisterhood, of women that on text that are in different groups. And I'm like, If I need to vent, I will vent. Or if I need to share a beautiful story, I will. And then I do the same for them on those days. And so we're in the ebb and flow of our lives together. But I will tell you, it is a day-to-day struggle for me because I want to help everybody and I
Mhm.
want to hug everybody. And I don't want there to be any hurts. And you can't help everybody. And that is, I hear my therapist and I hear Denise in my voice. You cannot help everybody. But also, this work is so good for my mental health too. The dopamine rush that I feel in this work, I feel that it has resonance, not just for me, but for so many. So I want to share that dopamine as much as I can. So I don't know what you would say, John, but I also have to get out and go run or pet my dog or eat really good food or read a book or watch some really crappy TV to take me away. So yeah.
I was gonna say that that is all true. Like, I think I didn't realize when we started the personal transformation that would come. I thought we were starting a thing, and you don't realize like it's gonna change everything. But definitely, like my morning practice is like everything. Like I have to work out to feel my best. I have to have hydration. I've got to like sit and have time to read and process and set the intention for the day. And the days that I skip any of those things, I'm just like completely off kilter. And I feel like increasingly so, the further that we're in this, that so many of our habits and rhythms are like the things that either make or break us. And I feel that to be so true. So taking care of ourselves, like we had some experiences in our work, and I don't know if B wants to go into this of how this landed directly in our purview, but we baked like mental health and well-being into like the very core of like the content we share, because we attended professional development gatherings for 15 years and I don't remember ever having a grounding exercise
Zero.
None.
of mental health and
None.
awareness. And it's
No,
like,
because it's too woo-woo.
Yeah,
yeah.
right.
And
Whatever.
you're
Yeah.
talking
Woo-woo
about
is
like
science.
you're talking to people that live at this intersection day in and day out in much
Yeah.
more traumatic situations that we're encountering. So we've just tried to normalize that instead of like making it a pillar of our content. We try to integrate it into our content and it's just part of the flow and normalizing that. But there can't be enough of that. Like I think that more of that is always a good thing, but trying to normalize talking about this and having open dialogue about it is where it's at.
Yeah. I think that's so critical. I remember someone saying this to me once and it's never left me, is that our brains are meant to actually sit still and our bodies are meant to move. But we've created a
Wow.
world where we're sitting still in our
Woo.
bodies and our brains are the ones that are spiraling.
Oh,
I'm
we're like
using
all
that, taking
trapped.
that, putting
Holy
that in my
heck.
quote tab now.
Isn't that so
That's so
powerful?
It's
true.
so
And
Yeah.
powerful.
I think about that, like with all of this, the rush of emotions that happen. And, like you said, like, it's just go for a run. I wish I liked to run. I think even if a bear chased me, I would just be like, yeah, sure, eat me. I hate
I
running
have bear
so
spray.
much.
Find something else.
So,
Go walk. Walking's so good for you.
yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Walking's the thing. That's going to outchase the bear for sure. But, it's, but no, it really is, right? Like it's whenever there's that emotional piece, it's like the movement of just getting your body to move the feelings around because otherwise it gets stuck within you.
Mm.
So that's really powerful. I'm curious about in the community that you've built, this membership community that's just so powerful. Again, I feel so grateful to be a part of it. What have you noticed with everyone's in there and it's like that, again, everything starts with one person, right? Then the two, then
Mhm.
five, then multiplies. And the
Mhm.
multiplying impact of what you can do is just so powerful. What have you noticed if you were to take back and look at the people in your community that, wow, they met maybe a couple years ago and now the ripple effect of just the people coming together, we are for good. Can you actually share like a mass impact that has actually shifted, something that has transformed because of the people coming together in your community?
Mhm. I mean, yes, we definitely we're always threading, and Becky has this dream that the co-founder of Reddit, Alexis Ohanian, would open up his cerebral database that could maybe make
He
all
has
these
this
connections
amazing
in the background.
technology to
Yeah.
put the constellations together, yes.
If you're listening, Alexis,
Alexis, call me,
please
please.
call Becky.
Bring Serena because I love her as well.
But it's like these sliding door moments that I realize that happen where I promise I'll answer your question, but I want to relate it to like how I'm seeing it in life right now.
Yeah.
My family's on this 50 state road trip that's going to take who knows how long. It was going to take 500 days, and that's like out the window because it's just the US is gigantic. And there's so many times that I meet people in very unusual places, such as a convenience store, that we have a very deep conversation. And I leave and I'm like, there's no reason that I should have been there to have that conversation.
Mm.
You know, there's no reason I should have been on this random sidewalk in San Francisco and just talked to this woman for 20 minutes. You know, it's like, I
Yeah.
feel like that's the magic of this community because it is a motley crew of change makers that are really heartwired, that are really value aligned, but they're not easy to define as an avatar, you know, because there are people that are embedded, are fundraisers, are executive directors, are leaders, but you also have like people that are consultants and that are like building their own thought leadership and change leadership platform. And you've got partners in the room. Like you've got all this like kind of different people, but these like connections that have happened are the ones that you're like, this wouldn't have happened without all of this. Like, I don't know if it's because of us. Like, I don't want to take the credit for that, but it's definitely because of
I
this
think you should.
community that people show up like that. And I think of like Taylor and Monique meeting in the community that hit it off. She's living in California, now in DC. Monique's in Austin. They become such kindred spirits that Taylor joins the board of Monique's organization. They start a podcast together. They're talking about reimagining like the overhead myth on their podcast in a 10-part series. And you're like, how do these things happen? Like, how do people just find each other? But good like finds this path, you know, in these connections. And there's a lot of stories that we don't know too, but the doors that we connect, I think always lead to generative people are just so dang generative and kind, and like the ripple keeps going. Who are you thinking of, B? Are you thinking of somebody?
I think I'm just thinking of we at one time mapped sort of this domino effect of the constellation
Oh
where
yeah.
somebody introduced us to this person who introduced us to this person, and then you can just see, and then the things that happen along the journey. These two got together and created a campaign for this, or this one ended up amplifying and coming onto this person's board, like you mentioned. I mean, I can think of one specifically. We have just an incredible friend named Anne-Marie Doherty, and she's the executive director of the Bob Woodruff Foundation, and they do a lot of amazing things for veterans families. And she came onto the podcast and she did a very simple yet powerful breakdown of how to rethink partnerships and how to go after very big partnerships through the lens of what she did with the NFL. And we had a tiny little nonprofit in our community, and I think he was one person, and he made a jump from his tech job. He felt convicted to start this foundation trying to get youth and sports and people together, and he ended up listening to that a couple of times. He ended up meeting with her, pitched the MBA, and then got something big for his
Oh,
organization from the steps of him coming into our organization as someone who worked at a tech company who had something on his heart that eventually led him to start this foundation. And now he's in Indiana doing big, beautiful things for youth in sports with incredible partners
Mm.
because Anne Marie said yes. And Anne Marie said yes to coming on the podcast. And she said yes to taking a meeting for him. I think of Anne
You guys talk
Marie
about
talking.
Simon. You guys talk about Simon.
Oh my
Oh
gosh,
gosh.
Simon Karanja from Jinja, Uganda. I mean, this is a person who found us so early on. He has a tiny, tiny little nonprofit. He does microfinance loans for women in rural Uganda, which, if you can imagine what a
wow.
loan can do for a woman in rural
Absolutely.
Uganda, and he just leaned in at every single avenue and showed up to everything. And we ended up understanding that he had like a 20-year-old laptop, which, I mean, to us in the States, 20 years old on a laptop seems like we can't even
Impossible.
conceive.
Yeah.
And so we sourced through the community and we said, "Does anybody have a laptop or some tech we could give Simon?" And people came together and we were able to ship him iPads and laptops and iPhones and chargers and cameras and SD cards, and what he's been able to do with that technology and the way he's been able to build community. He's hosted every Impact Up in his village along the Nile River. And he started by just inviting the local village leaders around them to come and talk about our topic of power and how they could share power among their villages. And then the second one was mental health. And they said, "Oh, we're going to invite all the villages again. And this time we're going to invite kids." Then the kids were brought in for mental health training. And somebody from Kenya drove in for that. And he invited his UN, like his ambassador, to the event. And then this last time, he had people from Nigeria, Kenya, Burundi, Rwanda, Tanzania. I mean, it's like become Impact Africa. And it's just because Simon believes. And Simon saw the power of community. I mean, I go back to Anne-Marie Doherty. We talked about this IVF program that she has, and I've met 3 people who've contacted her about starting their families through IVF. And I just think the thing I want people to hear is we don't need to know. We're great to let it be wild. We want it to be organic and wild because we don't need to measure good. We want it to ripple,
Mm.
however it shows up.
Oh my goodness. Like all those examples, I have chills like running down me just because I'm just like literally just you talking about it's making me feel so emotionally fulfilled. And I think that's
Me
again the
too.
power of good, right? The power of what you're doing and the community of that. And I think it goes back to this fact that, and while you were talking, it just keep coming up. When we're talking about the good that everyone's doing, it's really comes back down to relationships.
Mhm.
And what you have done is you've created a community of people who just deeply care and they want to see each other succeed. They want to champion each other and they want to support each other and they want to like and rise themselves. And so this idea that, oh, we have to have a social media like following and we have to have all these things. It's like those actually become like you realize, I think very quickly that that's very secondary. It's
Totally.
power of the heart movement and the relationships, and that's what you really have done is you've created an inclusive, safe space where it's not just about you guys lifting up this platform for fundraisers and nonprofit founders and leaders and change makers and social impact advocates, but you've literally created an ecosystem that allows people to feel so deeply connected to each other's work because they see the ripple effect of that. The ripple effect of that I'm doing my one little piece over here and someone else in the other side of the world is doing something that also is in alignment with what I'm doing, but just over there. So ultimately, we're all doing the same work and we're just taking
Mm.
that bite size of it. And that's what you've really created here. And it's such an honor. It really is. Like, I think it's such a
And
big, big piece. And I want to ask one final question to both of you, and I'll actually take a step back real quick. But Becky, you said that again, I'm going to go back to that I was looking at 45. I realized at 40 I was a child. So, what is something now that as you are moving forward, you're still working on? If I was to reframe a perspective for myself as I move forward into the next 5 years of my life and what we're creating here, what would
Mhm.
that be for both of you? What is something that you want to reframe a perspective on?
I'll say last summer, the last year of We Are for Good, before Impact Up started. So Impact Up is our quarterly gatherings that involve like the different countries. For someone listening that we didn't go into the depths of that. It was just a really hard year before that in a lot of ways. I think it's like growing pains of the business and like just trying to survive from like a cash flow and what are we doing with our lives and like what's going to work and what's not. And that summer we had been gifted the opportunity to go to this like conscious leadership retreat in Park City, something that we could have never been able to afford at this moment to go, but something I want to pass on to other people in the future. And transcendent experience on lots of levels, to like lean into like what does it mean to like live consciously, live in alignment with our light and find our purpose and get really clear about that. But there's a word that reframed for me that weekend or week that we were there that still hangs with me that I want to share is, we had done some kind of analysis and some reflection and some awareness work and whatnot. And this word that came for me was ready. And I wrote it down and I was like, I don't know why, but I feel like this needs to be the word that I need to like pour into. And over the course of the next like 3 days, I realized how many like limiting beliefs of like my own ability, my own preparedness for this moment, my own I'm not that polished of a speaker. I'm all the things that go back to my childhood of like, I'm not enough or I'm not the first to be picked. I'm like the underdog in this situation. And by the end of the weekend, from being in conversation with others and doing the deep work to realize what's my light, and my light is to encourage other people. Like that is my superpower. I love encouraging people, helping them find their courage. So why can't I do that for my own self? And I left that weekend saying like, no, I am ready. Like I already have within me what I need. And 2 weeks later was the launch of Impact Up. And it was very much a seminal shift of this belief that we're ready. Like you're ready to go, because the world doesn't need me to pretend to be you, my friend, because you're incredibly brilliant in all of your deep
Yeah, you are.
doctoral work that I could never accomplish. But the world needs me to show up with my light, and I am ready for
100%.
that, to step into it. So that really
That's
shifted for
cool.
me. And I try to remind myself of that too, just because it's easy to look around and be like, what am I? I'm imposter syndrome deluxe, But
Yeah, I
yeah.
get that.
Oh, I'm so sad I'm going after you now. That was so
I'm
good.
sorry.
Okay. No, that was wonderful and beautiful. I think I'm going to bookend something for you on reframing. I really did believe for pretty much all of my life that I was too much for the world. And so what I want to reframe for myself and for anyone listening out there is you're not too, and I'm putting the adjective there. I'm not too much. I'm just Becky. I'm
Yes.
just me. And the most beautiful, vibrant version of me is when I'm being me, wholly, when I'm not regulating down. And I wasn't even aware that when I was fully being me, this community grew even more when I was in that space of me being me. And so, what I want to say to you is don't hold yourself back. Do not allow these negative stories that people have told you. Maybe you've told yourself, to get into your head and make you believe this version when you already are the best version of yourself when you're you. And so that's the journey I'm on right now, is embracing that person. And I'd say I'm ready too. So I'm taking John's word. I'm ready, and let's
I'm
go.
taking that too.
Do it.
And I just want to say thank you, Payal, for trusting us. Not only having us on for this discussion, thank you for coming into our membership. Thank you for speaking at Impact Up. And we knew within 2 minutes of you being on the podcast, we were going to be best friends forever because of what
100%.
you generate into the world. So thank you. We want to give that love right back to you.
Aw. Honestly, I could talk to you for hours. I mean, I would love to just do like a marathon of just like, let's just
Let's
like,
do it.
but
Yes. Hackathon. We'll
Let's
just
get some
talk.
good
We'll race
food. Yes,
yes,
all the things.
yes.
tacos. Yes.
I'll say the one good thing in
Yes.
in honor of you guys here today that really has stuck with me, and I hope that everyone who's listening really listens to this part, is that it's these micro moments that have created this macro impact. And
Mm,
it's the fact that, John, when you're talking about how you had just a deep conversation at a 7-Eleven, right? We've become so immersed into just like, I got to go do my thing. Everyone's a stranger. You don't know your neighbors. You don't know anything. But then we get on social media and now we suddenly want to be like so supportive of that person, and it
mm,
starts with asking, how are you? Right? It starts with those simple things and building those simple micro relationships that can open doors to realizing what is out there in the world, right? It's like taking that, again, those kids from middle America and opening this world, and look at what you've done. Look at what
mm,
incredible space you've created. So I just want to say a big thank you to both of you for the work that you're doing, for the incredible space you're creating, the community that you have. Anyone who's listening who is part of the social impact world, who is in that, wants to make social change, who believes in doing it from a place of good and not from fear, you need to be in Jon and Becky's world. Like, it's a must have. It's an absolute must have. So thank you so much. And I'm so excited for everyone to connect with you guys on your podcast, on your, of course, with your LinkedIn, and just to be part of your membership community, because that is honestly where the power is. So
Mm,
big thank you to both of you for being here today.
Love you
my
forever, dear
friend,
person.
so
I
grateful for
really
you.
do.
Yeah, we think the
Mm.
world of you. Thank you.
I really hope that you enjoy this episode. And I just have one favor to ask you. If you could just make sure to hit that subscribe button, leave a rating and review, it's going to help us tremendously to make sure that we reach as many people as possible that you think should be listening to our episodes. I'll see you next week for another episode. And thank you so much for leaving that one review, that one subscription, and sharing this with your friends.